Hey there, and thanks for tuning in to Squash Radio. My name is Connor O'Malley, and I'm your host. Before we get into today's show, I wanted to share a little bit about me and why Squash Radio exists. So I've been a passionate squash player for almost 20 years, but what makes my path slightly different from your average squash player is I've also made squash my career. I've worn almost every hat and worked in almost every role in the industry. Some quick examples are I've gone from being a volunteer at a professional event to then becoming the CEO of the US Open. I've gone from trying to make Team USA to then becoming the director of all national teams while working at US Squash. And I've certainly gone from just playing on squash courts to focusing on how the sport can grow in the United States. What has been a big part of fueling my passion all these years are the fascinating, passionate, and dedicated people involved in our sport. So, Squash Radio? Well, that's just a way to try and help share those stories. We hope you like it, and if you're interested in growing the sport, get in touch. Or can you help share these stories? Comments are welcome on any social media or email us at squashradio@gmail.com. That's squashradio@gmail.com. Our biggest challenge is always trying to get the word out, so any help is so much appreciated. Without further ado, please enjoy the show. What about this?
This call is being recorded.
So my guest today is someone who really doesn't need any introduction to the squash community, especially in the United States, as she is the most successful US-born player in the modern era. That is Harvard graduate Amanda Sobhy, who is number 7 on the professional tour. A question for you. Have you ever really taken time to figure out what you want in life? Or felt yourself at a crossroads of what to do next? Likely the majority of us have or know someone. But what is different about the conversation today is Amanda is brave and candid to share her journey from this past year. I know a lot of us were hugely impacted by the year 2020 for many different reasons and on many different levels. This is just one story told in an authentic voice by a world-class athlete. Like always, we cover a range of topics, but we hope you enjoy our conversation. Hey there, squash fans. Welcome back to another episode of Squash Radio. We have a really exciting guest for you today, doing Amanda Sobhy, calling in. She's originally from New York State, but calling in today from Philadelphia, her new home. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Appreciate being on here.
Yeah, it's good to see your face, too. We're doing video. We're only going to get audio, though, but it's great to see your face. You always have such a smiling face to see, so it's good to see you.
I know, that's what I'm told by people. I feel like I have to keep it up.
So I'm actually going to start off in sort of a non-obvious place because we know so much about you and what you've achieved being a squash professional. And we'll go into that in a little bit more. But I'm curious, if you weren't a squash professional right now and you could snap your fingers and do something else, what might that be? In just an alternative universe, what do you think that might be?
Currently, if I were to say right now in the given place that I am in life, and just from what I've been surrounded by the last couple of years and everything, I would be in sports marketing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think there's been a lot of dialogue lately, especially in the squash world, on the marketing aspect and what's going to help grow the sport. And I've always been big. One, I love my social media. And 2, being a professional athlete, like I have to think of myself as a business. So I'm my own brand. And in order to get sponsors and kind of build my brand, I have to find ways to market myself. And that's got me ways of thinking of marketing in general. And then also just with the sport too. It's an amazing sport, but not that many people know about it. And in the States, it has this unfortunate connotation of being a little waspy country club sport. And so it's trying to find ways to bring squash into a bigger light, bigger, even better light too, and market it to the masses. So that's got me thinking. And with all of this downtime, I've been able to take some marketing courses and just learn a little bit more. since that's something I want to go into post career anyways. And I think given my personality, I just love interacting with people and events and socialization. And I think just it would be really, really fun to find ways to just build the sport in like a new, different light. And also
Yeah,
I like to almost push boundaries a little bit. And
sure. I will say, having known you for, gosh, it's been almost 13 years at this point.
yeah,
Very early on in your career, you were already distinguishing yourself by your branding. So I love that I didn't know that would be your answer, but you have been putting your money where your mouth is for a long time. So that's impressive. My question is, who do you look towards for inspiration? If you want to do marketing, who do you like? And doesn't have to be just one, but who piques your interest?
yeah, it's tough. I don't really know that many like marketers, but in terms of branding, a huge inspiration for me has been Nicole David.
Hmm.
She's retired and she's built this unbelievable brand of hers. She has this huge legacy to leave, and she's put a lot of thought into how she wants to leave her legacy and what she wants to do. And that's something that I truly admire. She's a unbelievable athlete, unbelievable person. And I've gotten to get the chance to know her a bit the last couple of years as she's been transitioning into retirement, and I've just loved it. Like I've been loving picking her brain on one, how you're able to remain being a world class, like unbeatable athlete for years on end, and also now that she's transforming into this new role of being a retired athlete, but she's still leaving this unbelievable legacy with her. And she's an inspiration to so many people. And it's something that I want to be able to do the same when my time comes in retirement.
I enjoy marketing myself, and it's hard to. Seth Godin's very interesting from a inspiring guy, like ways to really help communicate. But there's a gentleman with a philosophy who and practitioner of Gary Vaynerchuk or Gary V. I mean,
Oh,
he is
yeah.
just
I've heard about Gary. Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, he's really been a huge inspiration for me, and even just starting this podcast. And anyway, he's all about branding. So you're already well on your way of doing that.
One thing I did learn when I was out with my injury was get a head start on what you want to do when you retire because you never know when that's going to happen.
Yeah, it's very true. And I think you're right about your assessment of the sport. And I just see a ton of opportunity in terms of really help telling more of the stories of athletes, because
Absolutely.
I think that's really what people fall in love with, right? I mean, within all the other sports, whether it's Kobe or Derek Jeter or Tiger Woods, I know all those names spark sort of different emotions, but we all have an association to it because of a reason. And we hear their stories.
Absolutely. That's what I've been trying to tell people, especially in the higher organizations. But you can't really sell the sport of squash. If you're a squash person, you're going to appreciate it. But if you don't know squash, you're not going to give a shit about these rallies. But you are going to gravitate towards the stories of the players.
Yeah. I think we can admit that even though that's a gap that's still out there in terms of being able to tell these athletes stories, who would you say, like, if you could tomorrow, like, hey, I want to tell the story of maybe pick one female and one male athlete, who would those individuals be?
Yikes, putting it on a spot. Male athletes, one, I think there's two people gosh, there's so many different stories. So, like, let's say Mohammed Shirbagi's has a story because he's an Egyptian guy, and grew up in Egypt, but he doesn't have that same mold of an Egyptian where you stay in Egypt, you live with your parents until you get married, in which case the parents buy you a house that right near them, and it's just very kind of you just stay within the family, stay within Egypt, everything. And he kind of broke out of that mold by going to England, and he was very independent and
Yeah, at a young age, right?
at a young age, which like no Egyptians really do that. And it's tough. And you can just see how much it's shaped who he is today, and just having that upbringing in the UK, and like by far like the mentally one of the strongest squash players.
Yeah.
And so I think just his story is unbelievable. I think Paul Cole has a fantastic story of just someone who grew up not really being one of the best squash players, and he's worked really, really hard at it to become one of the best squash players. And I think that's inspiring to showcase that, you don't have to be this junior talent to become one of the best in the world in the end.
Yeah, I think for me, he reminds me a little bit of Nick Matthew in
Mhm.
terms of like just someone who puts so much into the physical aspect of being so physically fit. And, you know, I mean, Nick, who was just such a great ambassador to the sport, world number one, but Paul is he's impressive at what he's doing. I mean, do you know about his CrossFit story? Like, isn't he like high level CrossFitter?
I don't know, and I don't want to like say anything that's
Okay.
going to be wrong on here, so I'm going to just remove myself from that situation.
So then what about on the women's side? And you can, again, if we can find someone who isn't as obvious in the media and the
Yeah,
squash media, who jumps to mind for you?
this is not to be like bragging, but I consider myself to have an interesting story, especially going the college route and then playing professionally afterwards, along with rupturing my Achilles and coming back from it. Um, so there is an interesting story to my life as well, and being a dual citizen and having that U.S. upbringing, but an Egyptian father, which Egyptians are the dominant country in squash. So
Yeah.
that also is interesting. And then for other women, like the Egyptians all have they're all so good at squash and they have interesting stories, but I'm trying to think of ones that like people don't really know. The Gillis sisters as well, coming from Belgium, and now they're both in the top 20. I think that's phenomenal.
Well, I mean, I think part of the challenge here that we're identifying is there's actually a lot of great stories to be told, and it's just what is meaningful to that community.
Exactly.
So, where I would like to transition is to is, and part of the reason why I reached out to you about doing this interview was one of the most recent blog posts that you did on your website.
Yes. Glad that you read it.
Yeah, I mean, I often read a lot of what you put out there, and it just kind of struck a chord that it was just you're trying to shed a light on what it's like to be a professional squash player. And it really it felt very honest. And I think there's even more things that you maybe didn't include there. And we don't have to, just say whatever you feel most comfortable. But what I thought I would do for any listener out there who hasn't read your post yet is I would set the stage by giving a little bit of context on your post. So I'm going to read a little bit of what you wrote.
All right, go for it.
And mind you, I am kind of taking two sentences and combining them so they're not exactly how they wrote them. I don't want to be called out for falsifying here. But so here's the quote. I'd packed up my belongings in my Boston apartment by myself and moved to a new city and unpacked everything by myself in the midst of a global pandemic. It was stressful enough, and I went through some major personal issues that left me emotionally and mentally broken by the end of the summer. With my disappointing tournament results, I found myself at a crossroads. My motivation was at an all time low. The United States was raging with COVID, and I did not know when my next tournament would be. I realized I had to decide to either go all in and put my head down and work, or start transitioning out of being a professional squash player and start looking for a proper job. I stood at this crossroads deep in reflection for a while.
Yeah. Well, those are some heavy sentences.
I know it's odd when you sort of write and you put it out there in the universe and suddenly I'm reading it back to you. So I know what that's like.
Yeah.
But I guess the question I would have is what did you learn about yourself at this crossroad period?
Yeah. So I'm all about authenticity. I know other people don't share the same view and they want to keep their lives a bit more private and just show what they want to show and have just tournament results and social media posts of what they want to say, be their kind of like put it out to the world. And I totally respect that. But for me, I've always kind of been someone that's very blunt, very honest. I don't sugarcoat anything, which sometimes can come off the wrong way. But I want to show people the like full picture that, being a professional athlete, it's not all roses and dandelions. Like it's tough work and it's not always about what you see in tournament results and ranking numbers. There's so much more that goes on behind the scenes that contributes to our successes or failures. And I just want to show that the stuff that we go through is similar to what everybody else is going through. They think that because we're athletes, we're like some superhumans that don't struggle at all. But like, yeah, I fucking struggle a shit ton. I mean, I've had a year, and I did the same thing when I was injured. I wrote about my injury and kind of what goes on behind the scenes, because most times when athletes get injured, they just drop off the face of the planet. And I was like, no, like, I want to show people and write about the grind that I have to go through with my injury and what my new normal's like. And so it was so relatable to people. So many people, even to this day, write to me and they were like, I just ruptured my Achilles and someone recommended your blog and I read it and it was incredible. Just everything you went through is stuff that I was going through. And it just felt really nice to know that I wasn't alone. And hearing that is inspiring, like to know that I help somebody, even someone I've never met before. Just to know that, like, the stuff that I go through or the stuff they go through is the same stuff that I go through. And I feel like with my platform and being a professional athlete, I feel like I have this platform to share that I go through struggles as well. That the stuff that I go through in life is stuff that everybody else goes through. And we all struggle. And like, it's okay to not be okay. And like, but from that, like, choose not to give up. And I think
Hmm.
that was the big thing that I learned this year was that I wanted to play for myself. And I kind of got to that point where I lost a little bit of my purpose and like love for the game.
You said that you want to play for yourself. Does that mean prior to this, you felt as though you were playing for others?
It wasn't so much others, but you have a lot of external motivation. So like you want to play for the crowd, you want to play,
Hmm.
with US squash, like you have the USA on your back and you want to kind of do it for them and the organization, and you're just pumped up and fueled by all of these external factors that you just, when that was taken away, when like crowds were taken away, our funding was taken away, like all the support, and it was just kind of left down to me a bit. And I had to kind of face myself in the mirror and be like, am I willing to do this for myself?
Hmm. So all of those external reasons kind of went away, and I guess, I mean, metaphorically speaking, very exposed in terms of like what you were thinking and feeling. So did it kind of hit you all of a sudden, or was this a gradual building
I
aspect?
think it has been a little up and down in the last year. I haven't had the best results. I've struggled with little injuries and loss of motivation. And I just kind of wasn't as excited being on court and competing that I had been in the past, which happens. I mean, athletes go through it. Like, and anybody goes through burnout, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just finding a way to come out of it instead of letting it kind of take over and then you just move on from it or you quit. And I think I have, like, as much as I do love being on tour, it's been tough on me mentally,
Hmm.
just with like the highs and lows of it all. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I definitely know what it's like. I think that just as you're saying that the challenges that you as a professional athlete face, that someone's a average Joe, that they rupture and injure themselves, you're going to feel a lot of the same things. We're still human.
Yeah.
And I think that, I've done a lot of entrepreneurship and it's just constant failing. And it's okay because I'm always learning, but it still doesn't mean that it's very much, it's a path that you do alone, frankly.
Yeah.
And so just knowing that there are others out there going through a similar thing, even if it's not the same, it's like, hey, this is challenging. So I hear you.
Yeah. It definitely was. And then over the break, just being in one place for an extended period of time, kind of just enjoying life, working out for my own health and well being instead of having to train and my body feeling good. I was injury free and mentally, like I was pretty happy for majority of the lockdown. And so when I did come back into being on tour and I didn't have great results. And like, I was just very much feeling very much on my own and underappreciated by kind of US squash dropping our funding and everything during this time and just support in general. And so I just was kind of, and I was playing these tournaments and sometimes my matches were at like 11 in the morning and with no crowds. And I was just thinking to myself, like, what the fuck am I like? Why the fuck am I doing this? Like, I'm not actually enjoying it.
Yeah, because it's not easy.
It's not easy at all. And
Yeah.
I'm killing myself. And I had some shitty losses and came back after a month away and like barely making rent. And I'm like, well, do I want to continue doing this when I don't really know when the next tournament's going to be? Or
Yeah.
should I start looking for something else?
Yeah. So you're it sounds like you're able to recognize like, hey, I'm at this crossroad, right? And where did you look for in whether it's reading or support or people or like how did you start kind of trying to tackle that problem?
Yeah. I think I spent a week where I didn't even touch a racket, think about squash whatsoever. I just hung out with my friends and like
Yeah.
my close closest group of friends and I kind of told them like how I was feeling and they all said they were like you can't quit like you're so inspiring to so many people like you have no idea the impact that you have on all these people.
Yeah.
And it just I kind of lost that a little bit and I forgot about it.
Well, we don't always hear it, right?
Yeah.
And we don't I think it's almost human nature. Like we bypass successes because it just feels like a given versus the failures we feel we live a lot more deeper. And the reality is we learn more from our losses.
Yeah.
So I think and it's interesting through this past year for even for myself is just practicing gratitude.
Yep.
And it really is interesting. There's an element that I just thought that this was like, okay, practice gratitude. That sounds good. But when it clicks from like being genuine and embedded into what you do on a daily basis versus something that you have to quote
Mhm.
practice. I don't know. It's the equivalent I would say is we all know we should solo in squash, right? Go
Yep.
practice. So the difference is showing up to the court and just hitting balls or showing up and it actually benefiting you. And I
Yeah.
think that's the sort of difference for the practice versus aiming for it to
Mhm.
improve.
Yeah. And so I'm glad like when I was able to surround myself with people that I truly love and who care about me. And I think that it's been tough with the pandemic in general just not being able to get that social aspect and I didn't realize how much I missed it. And it helped a ton and it kind of just hearing from my friends and those that they believed in me. And
Yeah.
I just felt kind of a little bit alone. And to know that I had all of that, all of their support, all of their belief, to hear that I inspired them, I inspired others. And it made me realize that, I don't want to quit. I don't want to go out this way.
Yeah.
I have so much more to give. And regardless of whether I achieved or not, there's no way that I was going to give up yet.
Yeah. Let's just say, and hypothetically, you found yourself at this crossroad again in like, a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. What do you think you might do differently?
I think it's tough when you're kind of in this dark place a little bit. It's hard to kind of remove yourself out of it and look in or kind of see this light at the end of the tunnel a little bit. And it almost feels that you're just aimlessly walking in the dark and all you can really do is just put one foot in front of the other and just hope that like at some point you're going to make it out to the other side. But, I think tough times make tough people. And I almost view these like difficult times in life as a way to see how strong I am mentally and physically and emotionally, just how strong I am as a person. And it's almost instead of going in thinking like, oh my God, like the world sucks and like being very negative, it's like, okay, I'm in this difficult time. Like, I'm going to find my way out of it and like bring it on. Like I'm going to handle it. So having this different approach. And I think I got knocked down I was pretty defeated after my first wave of tournaments when I came back in October. And I think if I happen to go through a similar stint again in a few years, which I'm sure burnout's going to happen in a few years again, I think learning from this experience will be the mindset that I choose to have will be different and more positive, and just knowing that, like, I can get through anything.
One thing that jumps to mind in a similar period, I find myself asking myself questions. And what were those questions that you were asking yourself?
I was asking if one, do I truly love this sport? Which I do. At the end, it's something that, I chose to be a professional. I knew I wanted to be a professional from a young age. And I had a very overbearing, strict parent. My dad was my coach growing up, and he kind of is a very old school mentality where it was like more is more, not less is more,
Mm.
more is more. Like, you put in your training sessions in. If you had a bad session, like, that was your day off. You flew to a tournament, that was your day off. You wanted to go hang out with your friend, you have to train beforehand. And it's so easy to kind of resent the sport because of that sort of upbringing. But, you know, it was tough. And there were many times where I was just crying on court and I didn't like it, but I put the work in still. I still did those sessions even with tears running down my face if need be. Like, I still did that session before my senior prom and showed up to my pre-prom with wet hair because all I had time for was to shower, throw on my dress, and go to my pre-prom. But I love the sport and I knew I wanted to play professionally. I knew that I wanted to be one of the best in the world. And I think doing it, it comes back to that, like, inside motivation of, like, I wanted to do this for myself. I wasn't doing this to, like, please my father who wanted to make me world number one. I wanted to do it because I wanted to prove to myself that I could become one of the best in the world. And I truly love the sport. And I think that helped me, that it was that question. And also, would I be happy? Would I truly be happy if I walked away from the sport? If I looked back in a couple of years, would I have regretted it? And I wasn't ready to move away from the sport. I had more to give. Yes, if I went into maybe marketing, it would have been fun for like a stint, but seeing my peers and competitors playing in tournaments once, especially once the pandemic hopefully comes to an end and life gets back to normal and we're playing the full circuit and everything, like, I'm going to miss that. I'm going to miss competing, even if right in the moment I'm kind of like very anti competing. But
Hmm.
it was those two questions. And I knew that it would have been an emotional decision in the moment had I just decided to transition out or just not care as much. Because deep down, I really did care.
So it sounds like those were the two right questions that you found for yourself. Did you figure out some of the wrong questions you were asking yourself?
I think I was looking a little bit short sighted and just disappointed in what was happening in the moment, and like the last few months in terms of the lack of support. Like, I felt very underappreciated by US Squash for dropping our funding, and then finding out while I was in the midst of my tournaments that our funding being cut was going to be extended until July 2021. And the reason I found out about this was on the PDF slides of the board meeting, because I'm one of the athletes on the board. And we didn't even get a conversation, like no conversation, no email, no nothing. And it's like, well, I've worked so hard. Like, I've helped you guys to kind of, as an organization, get you on the map to be like, wow, this is an organization that's like producing top players here. And this is how, and especially for the women's side, like, we are a force to be reckoned with. Like, we're doing really, really well. And this is kind of how we're treated. And so I was just pretty kind of pissed off about that. Just, it was a little shock to the system competing with in tournaments with minimum crowds and just not having that sort of external like support, even if the crowd's against me, like just to have that rowdiness. And so I was just thinking about all very much in the moment. And, I just moved down to Philly. I didn't really have a coach here. I didn't have a fitness coach here. Like, there's just, I just felt very much doing things on my own and with little to no help. And I was like, oh my God, like, why
It's
am I
overwhelming.
doing this then? Like,
Yeah.
so it all kind of just combusted like in my face in the last like few months. And I was just thinking about in the moment instead of the big picture and like the big purpose of why I am like why do I do what I do? Like why am I killing myself in these training sessions? Like why do I wake up every day when my body is like, no, stay in bed, please? And like I go and do these like disgusting treadmill sessions and like ghosting for an hour.
You mentioned losing the support from US Squash, and I'm curious also, and I actually do want to talk, we'll drill down more into like Team Sobhy, but if we think of that from, well, let's go there. So there's Team Sobhy, I know, but every player has this, right? In terms of there's a lot that goes behind the scenes to make anything work. And individual players are no exception. And the way I kind of carve this up is there's the business side of things and then the player development side of things. So I'm just curious on the business side, there's manager, agents, sponsors, like that kind of stuff. So, with US Squash cutting their funding, were there other sponsors that were in a similar position?
Well, actually, my other sponsors, US Squash was my biggest kind of support in terms of finances.
Hmm.
And they were fantastic with their support, their elite athlete program. Like, it's been so helpful the last few years. And, like, we're really appreciative of it, you know, just to be able to not have to think about, like, oh my God, how am I going to be able to afford my training expenses and all of that? And for them to just kind of wipe away that sort of stress in our lives so where we can just focus on training and being the best athlete is amazing. And when that kind of got cut away in the beginning, at first it was till January 1, and we're like, okay, we don't really have any tournaments, la di da. It's okay to not have our funding because we're not at this point, like, I wasn't really training in the summer. Like, I was dealing with some outside personal issues too. And it was fine. Like, the expenses weren't that high anyways. But fortunately, my other sponsors, Head Squash, Teuton Shoes, Squash Zone, Beam, they all stuck by me. And like, I love them for it. And the
Hmm.
fact that like they stuck by me during this financial like catastrophe for so many businesses and the pandemic and everything, and they still believed in me and they still wanted to support me. Like, that's something I am truly grateful for. And I can't thank them enough.
Yeah. In terms of other people on Team Sobhy on the business side of things, who else helps you with this?
Well, I have a manager. It's Dynamics 7. It's Daryl Selby. He's a male professional player, and that's his business. And so he's managing a couple of us players, which has been super helpful. So I don't really have to be the one negotiating contracts for
Hmm.
myself, which is kind of
Yeah.
awkward. And I can just kind of send everything to him. Which
Mhm.
I love. It's like one less worry for me. And because he's a squash player, like he's looking out for us. He knows
Yeah.
market and squash, and he's not trying to like jip us out on anything. Like he's looking out for our best interest, which is nice to have.
He's a great guy and so well positioned for this stuff. And I mean, contract negotiation is a skill, right? So if you're doing it only once or twice a year, like versus someone that's doing it, so that makes a ton of sense. And Daryl's, I love what he's doing.
Yeah, so that's been super helpful, and that's pretty much on the business side of things. That's Team Sobey. And I'm personally, for me, I only want to like be sponsored by companies that I believe in. I'm not big on just doing it for like the money or the paycheck or like, yeah, or that kind of stuff. If it's a company that I believe in and I want to help and be a part of, I am more than happy to get sponsored by, which is why I'm very happy with the sponsors that I have and hopefully get some more in the future.
Is there a sponsor that or a type of sponsor that you feel like you're missing that you just want to put it out into the universe?
I'm missing the like big corporate sponsor or something, like one, I go
Hmm.
to the clothing sponsor. So Nike, Under Armour, any of those, like, would love that. But yeah, I think just having like the Egyptian players, they have the CIB
Hmm.
in Egypt, and to just have a major sponsor that's kind of just like plastered right dead center on my gear would be phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, in the US, I mean, sponsorship dollars are just such a real struggle. The number of professional tournaments that go on here in the US has a ton of tour prize money, but a lot of those events are barely break even, marginal profit, or lose money. So
Yeah.
I think it goes back to the marketing aspect that we need to bring more attention to this and then get those kind of dollars through the door.
Hmm.
So, in going to the player development side, talk through who's on the team Sobe there.
Yeah. So it's a big team. I need a lot of support to function basically. But I've been in prior to being in Philly, I was based in Boston for, let's say, 5 years. Yeah, after college. And then I was 4 years at Harvard. So I was 9 years in Boston, which is a long time.
Yeah.
And I was working with Thierry up there, and my fitness coach was Micah Logan, who I started working with right after college. And they were kind of the glue to keep me together. And they've been so helpful, and I can't thank them enough. And then as the years kind of went on, I realized you need a little bit more than like a squash coach and a fitness coach. And so I got a nutritionist when I ruptured my Achilles. So she's based, actually, half my team already is based in Philly, which
Hmm.
was super helpful too. So my nutritionist, Nairi, she's amazing. And my sports psychologist I was with Amy Gross, working with her for a few years until she went back into the corporate world. And then I'm working with Dr. Eric Zilmer, who's the athletic director at Drexel. And he's been phenomenal.
You're working with him in terms of sports
Sports
performance,
psychology. Yeah.
sports psychology. Yeah, he's a great guy.
Yeah, yeah, he's a phenomenal guy. And then in terms of physio, like I had someone up in Boston that I was working with on the regular. And also when I ruptured my Achilles, I did part of my rehab, the like second part of my rehab down in Philly with Joe Zarrett at his place there at Rehab and Fitness. So I have half my team in Philly, which has been great and has made the transition a bit better, like a little bit smoother than just going in completely blind and starting from scratch. And the squash community here in Philly is fantastic. I mean, everyone has been so nice and just welcoming me and being like, oh, if you need anything, happy to help.
Yeah.
But I think with the pandemic, it's been difficult to find a coach to work with down here and also a fitness coach. So I've had to kind of look outside or elsewhere, even like virtually if need be. I still keep in touch with Thierry, but it's more on a consulting level and like at tournaments just because he knows me for so many years. But I've been getting on court a little bit with Gilly. I got on court with him a bit this summer. And then also Mustafa Bayoumi. He played at St. Lawrence. He's an Egyptian guy. And he's coaching at a club out in the suburbs in Philly. And so I've been working with both of them while I've been here. And they've been so helpful. And I really appreciate that because otherwise, like, I would have been stuck between that. And then the Racket Club of Philadelphia has been so kind in giving me a membership to allow
Oh
me
wow,
there. Yeah,
great club.
fantastic. And so when I did get back into training, when I did make that decision to kind of put my head down and get back to work, I needed to find some joy in squash again, and I needed to have fun being on court again. I didn't want to just go into training and just get on court and do the same kind of silly routines with zero purpose. Like I needed to find that love again. And I found it in the form of playing 2 against 1 versus the pro shop guys at the Racket Club, James Asher, Robbie Whitehouse, and John Lumley. And it's been so much fun and super competitive.
Yeah. And are you guys ever?
I have a 6-0 record.
6-0. All right. All
Like,
right.
so pissed. I love it.
I like it. We're going to take a quick break to hear a word about our sponsor. So, Lee, we want to thank you for being our first sponsor on Squash Radio. And just want to say, you've sponsored other avenues, but squash is always where your heart's at. What does it mean to you to be sponsoring squash?
I think there's just a lot of interesting people in the sport. I've attended junior tournaments, I've been to professional tournaments, and you can always get into some engaging conversations. And I think Squash Radio is an avenue of bringing those people to the forefront. And I'm sure a lot of people would like to listen to them. And sponsoring this, we're just facilitating that.
I think you nailed it. Is there anything else you might want to add? But I think you nailed it.
That's exactly what I think. Because I'm in, like, with Hope. I've met Hope so many times and they got into a little bit of conversation, but listening to that conversation you had with her, she's just a squash through and through person. And I don't know how many listeners you get, but it doesn't matter. It's the fact that people can now relate to Hope as this person. Hopefully they're going to do that with me. I'm sure, because I'm quite a private person. I've never been a person who hung around the squash circle of people, but when I do, I've got some very good friends and they will probably know me, but there's a lot of people who saw me at junior tournaments and a lot of my juniors were top players in the country. But I think it's a great way of bringing some of the personalities from squash.
That was Lee Witham, who is the CEO of Pro Sports LED, the sponsor of this podcast. You probably don't even think about lighting, and neither did we until we started talking to Lee. And now we totally get the problem that Pro Sport LED is fixing. And we know maybe that's not you now, or maybe not you ever. But if you know anyone who might be interested or need to improve their lighting for squash, tennis, soccer, you name it, it would mean a lot to us and our sponsor if you'd put us in touch. You can go to squashradio.com/LED or email squashradio@gmail.com. That's squashradio@gmail.com. Thank you again, and back to our show. Well, I appreciate your openness here and talking about a tough subject. And I think it's also, like I said, the people that relate to your physical injury, I think will definitely relate to this too. And we all go through it. And even just for myself recently, because I was having some tough times and felt like breaking, I was kind of like, fuck, I'm breaking down, you know? But I did kind of, I'm sure it's already out there. So I'm not, I'm either not accrediting it to the right place, but I think that if you're having a breakdown, it means that you're almost ready for a breakthrough.
Yeah.
And that's kind of giving me some solace in terms of coming into the new year, the 2021. I'm going to try and do what I can is just and do it as much as I can for what I want to, right? I mean, it just kind of shows that life is too short to not kind of approach it that way.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I kind of the last couple months, and I am coming out with my last blog post for 2020 episode, we'll say part 5, and it talks about when I hit my third major breakdown in 2020. I think because I had talk about breakdowns, I've had my fair share, but the summer was just kind of one long one, and I hit my third one right before Thanksgiving. And that was kind of as I was just getting into momentum with training and everything. And then with the cases rising again, and Philadelphia just announced, oh, we're going back into a second lockdown until January 1. And I just lost it completely. Yeah. And I was like, well, this sucks. So it was tough. And I was working virtually with this fitness coach who my sister was working with at the beginning of the year when everything shut down. His name's Sammy. And fortunately, she was so nice when I was in Egypt in October in between events. And she was like, you know what? Just come with me to a session with Sammy. Like, you're going to enjoy it. And I was just feeling really like down about my performance. I did something to my hip, like my body's breaking down, my mind's just kind of gone. And I was like, fine, you know what? I'll go. And I went, really enjoyed it. And I kind of told them, and I was like, listen, can we work virtually? Like, I need help. Especially after I came back from the Egyptian Open and I was kind of just lost and I needed some guidance.
What does that look like? So you and Sammy are talking. What does that interaction look like then?
Yeah, it's we'll work out virtually a few times a week. This was when the racket club was open, so I would go. We had 3 sessions in the gym, a ghosting session, and then a plyometric session, which I did on court. And so the sessions in the gym, we'd be on FaceTime, and I would have my phone on FaceTime with him, and I'd prop him up on like my water bottle, and I just bring him around the gym with me to all the different machines and he
Right.
would tell me where to go. And it worked.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think this is also a good reminder that it was around this time last year where I front loaded. I hired a trainer because I was like, look, I need to be told what to do, right? And
Yeah,
it's reassuring to hear that, again, breaking down that wall of what it's like for professionals. Like, you're building the team, you're the engine, you're doing a lot of its stuff, but you still need to be told, or you want to work together in terms of how to achieve your goals, right? So
exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
And it was so helpful because there's things that I know what to do and I know these exercises and everything, but just to have the expert to tell me what to do in terms of the sequencing and
yeah,
things with a purpose and to provide some structure into my day and like my week. And I love structure.
yeah,
I love
yeah.
having a little routine.
For me and in business is I coined this, and came out of a company I started where I was the founder, another founder again, and I dubbed it founder syndrome, where like when it's your own thing and you're so in it that it's hard to have the perspective, and we
Yeah.
need others. That's why it's actually way easier for me to go into someone else's business and have the perspective of like, hey, this is what you're really good at. These are your opportunities. These are the steps that we need to take to get there. Versus when it's myself, it's like you're driving, you're keeping charge of everything, and it's hard. So I think perspective really helps.
Yeah. So I was really thankful for that.
We're going to transition to another topic, but I did have a fan question came in for you.
Oh, lovely. Okay.
And it was interesting. It was, yeah. So let me just kind of read it out. So it's about dreams,
Dreams. Okay.
dreams, but actually like, sleep dreams. And so this has happened many times in my life, where you have kind of like stress work dreams
Mhm.
where I'm like, me from running a ton of junior events and just professional events and that kind of stuff. And it's stressful. So I would have like, hey, I forgot to do X and the whole system is breaking down. So, in terms of your job, do you have any work dreams? What does that look like for Amanda Sobhy's work dreams?
Gosh, most of the time I do not remember my dreams, but they are extremely bizarre. One of the companies I'm sponsored by, and this is not meant to be a plug, but it's going to sound like a plug, but just it's a transition. So, but anyways, is this CBD company called Beam, and it's a startup based in Boston. My best friend got me some products for my birthday a year and a half ago, and I absolutely love them. And like when I was in Boston, I reached out to them and I was like, "Hey, like, do you sponsor athletes? Like, I'm a la di da professional squash player. I love your products. They're THC free. They're completely 100% free of any sort of banned substance. So it's perfect for professional athletes. Basically, all the CrossFitters are using them now. And they came out with this sleep product called Dream. And it is this powder that tastes like a cinnamon hot cocoa. And I'm obsessed with it. Literally, like anybody who knows me knows that I just like talk about Beam Dream all the time. And I've gotten so many people hooked on it, and it gives you the best night's sleep ever. But the weirdest thing is that it gives you the wildest dreams. I haven't figured it out, but it just gives you the most bizarre dreams. And so I think almost every night I have some weird wackadoodle dream, but I can't remember it ever really the next morning. So that was kind of the landing of the plane in that conversation.
So no, like I'm playing the U.S. Open and then I forgot to string my rackets
No,
and I have to play
I
the
don't have
tournament.
most of the time it's not really like
Okay,
squash related. It's just weird.
I like it. And just to clear something up, because you said it's THA free, which means, and it just means that it's a non-activant, that it won't induce any sort of hallucinogenic qualities, right?
Yeah. So it's strictly CBD.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of that kind of stuff. I haven't done it nearly as much, so now, hey, dream, I gotta get, or beam dreamed, I gotta get out there.
You know?
So before we go into our quick fire questions, which are some questions I ask every guest, one of the last topics I had for you was talking about identity. And what I mean by that is this is a hot topic in my family because we're Irish American. Like literally both my dad was born in Ireland, my grandfather was born in Ireland, but my mother and my grandmother are American. So there's a hot topic of like, and I have dual citizenship myself. And so, this, we talk about this and it's interesting generationally, plus like where we go in America, how we view each other's like, are we Irish American, American Irish, American in Ireland, American. So I'm just curious about how I suspect you've had a similar experience a little bit. And so, tell me what it's like being, or how would you define yourself?
Yeah, I say I'm Egyptian American, or I'm happy. My mom's.
And you have a passport?
I do. I'm a dual citizen. My Arabic is visible, and I don't really look Egyptian at all. But
My Gaelic is terrible.
yeah, but it's always nice to be a dual citizen. And my mom was born in the U.S. My dad was born in Cairo. But growing up, I think I've always been proud to be Egyptian. It's unique, and I pride myself on being different. I absolutely love the fact that, when I'm in the US, I can be like, yeah, I'm half Egyptian. My father's from Egypt. I also, because I like to push boundaries and kind of speak up or clap back at people, sometimes also we were raised Muslim, and, the Muslim religion and faith doesn't get the best rep, especially in the US. So
Mm-hmm.
I've always loved growing up when people start.
You still practicing?
No, I'm not.
Yeah.
No. But I've always loved when people kind of bring it up and they talk badly about Islam and Muslims, and I would go tell them, I was like, I'm Muslim. And I'm like, I was brought up being Muslim. I was like, not all Muslims are bad people. Like, that's the thing. And when they kind of talk bad about, the Middle East and the whole region and Egypt and everything, like, I love to just tell people, like, I'm Egyptian. And then people are like shocked by it because, so it's always been something that I'm very passionate about. And I'm really grateful for being half an American, half Egyptian. And I think the same thing too. I love whenever I'm in Egypt, like, I love being that obnoxious American. I think I just don't want to fit in. That's the main thing.
Well, it's interesting you say that. I feel like I've never fit in, so I've always stuck out.
Yeah.
And I think I've just become very comfortable with being in that position. So it's benefited me in the long run, but that doesn't mean it was hard going through it for me.
Yeah.
But I have a question. What was your youngest memory of going to back to Egypt?
Well, we went to Egypt a lot growing up. I would say probably for since I was 6, we would go there every year. And before we were squash players, we would go. This is when my parents were together, and that we would go just on holiday, see family there, and enjoy the pyramids. And then as we became squash players, we would go there for squash, and that's
Mm-hmm.
all we did all
Yeah.
the time. So
So a question there is, when you fly back to Egypt, does it feel different to you? I mean, you travel the globe. So when you arrive in Egypt, does it feel any different to you from any other country?
yeah, I think the one thing that I don't entirely like about Egypt is that I'm not my own individual person. I am Khaled Sobhy's daughter. Everybody knows my dad in Egypt. And so I'm
Yeah.
just not that independent there. And it wasn't until this last trip that I was there the last few weeks where I felt the most independent. And it only took about 20 years. But I always relied on him to drive us everywhere, speak the language, the phones. And so I very much needed him. I was very dependent on him there. And it just kind of tied my identity to him instead of being my own individual person. And, because my dad is so well known in Egypt and everybody likes him and all of that, every time I saw somebody, it would just be like, "Hi, Amanda, where's your dad?" And I'm like, is anyone excited to see me? I was like, "I'm
Yeah.
doing fine, thanks." So I just kind of got used to saying like the small talk in Arabic, like, "Hi, how are you doing? I'm fine, thanks." And then they'd be like, "Where's your dad?" And I'm like, "I don't know, somewhere over there." And that was it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I do feel so for me in going to Ireland, I didn't move to the States till I was like 14 myself. And so we did go to Ireland fairly frequently growing up, but it always felt different to me. Like just being on Irish soil. It felt different. I don't know how else to explain it than it feels more home. And it's another point off of what you just said about I would always be introduced as either Cormac's son or Ernie's
Yeah.
son. And actually more generally more speaking, I get introduced as the grandson of. And I think that that is because in America, we're very much self identity based, but like they'd be like, hey, this is Amanda. She's originally from New York, but went to Harvard.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so we try and bridge these connection points. And I just think in America's, we don't have much tradition, so to speak. Like we're a cross pollination of so many people. So I wonder if that plays in at all. As when you said it reminded me of my own
Yeah.
experience.
Well, I'm a very independent person. So I love kind of being my own identity and just my own self. And so I struggle a little bit when I have to kind of get lumped into being the daughter of Khaled Sophie. And even it is a cultural thing. So all of our middle names is the same between my brother and sister. And it's my dad's first name. So I'm Amanda Khaled Sobhy. My brother's
Mm-hmm.
Khaled Sobhy. And it goes back to like our grandpa. So my full name is Amanda Muhammad Khalid Mustafa Muhammad Sobhy.
Wow.
So it goes back. My dad has two first names. I don't know why. And that's Muhammad Khalid. And then my grandfather's name is Mustafa, and great grandfather is Muhammad. So it just goes back the lineage, and all of them are
Wow.
the same.
Yeah.
So they know who our father is, they know who our grandfather is, they know who our great grandfather is.
Well, that's awesome. And it is, I mean, there were these systems that were created in terms of like, even in Irish, it's like whether it's O or Max or, son of or those kind of stuff, right? And actually, I'm O'Malley, but the rest of my family is Malley.
Oh, wow.
My grandfather added the O. And I mean, it had to do with he joined the Irish Republican Army, so it wasn't Irish enough. So he had to add the O. So anyway, there's only a few of us that have the O'Malleys in it versus the whole other side of the family is Malley. So there's two different naming conventions, and I appreciate you. When I'm going to bring you on, I was like, I don't know if anyone's ever asked you that, so I at least wanted to.
No one really has. So I appreciate you asking.
Good. Well, thanks for going with it. So we're going to go into the quick fire section now.
All right, I'm ready.
And what we do is we break this up into two different parts. One is actually about squash because and it wasn't until later, like episode 20 or something, where a guest asked, like, hey, do you mind if you ask me some questions about squash? I was like, yeah, for a squash podcast, we should definitely do that. So it's broken up into two sections, one about squash, the other one about just some standard questions I ask everyone. So the first section, and we're going to give you 90 seconds on the clock.
Okay.
You can spend a little bit more if you need to, or you can be however short you want. But either way, we'll try and give you a little bit of time limit. And we're going to go through different areas of the sport. And I'd love for you to highlight what you love about that area, and then also what would you want to see improve.
Okay.
So we got the hot topic, number one, 90 seconds, pro squash.
Oh, the thing I love about it the most?
Yeah.
Just high performance. And then what was the second part to it?
What you would want to see improved in that area.
Oh, okay. Mainstream.
Mainstream.
Make it more mainstream.
So deploying sort of like your marketing skills. Yeah. I get it. And then what about the area of college squash? What do you love about college squash?
I love the camaraderie and also the diversity now. Fantastic. And then one thing that I would love to see it more, I would love to see it grow to kind of the big state schools.
Yeah. There's one area that I do try and test myself to like see how big you could go in anything, right? And so in squash, like I hope that in the next 5 years or 10 years that we are hosting college nationals, like the team nationals, maybe the individuals too, in Madison Square Garden.
Oh, that would be so cool.
right? And it's like, so if not there, well, what else is that big arena that we're taking over? And it's, I mean, because college squash just, it's such a fun product. It is just,
It's fantastic. It's so much fun. And I think it needs to be highlighted more.
yeah. What about the area of junior squash? And again, you can speak of it from either your experience or kind of your observations of it now, or what do you love about it and what would you want to see improved?
What I loved about junior squash back in the day was being able to hang out with all my friends, since that was like my social time. It might be a
Hmm.
little different scenario now. I think what the downside of it now, I think it's way too cutthroat and it's unbelievably competitive. I think some parents are getting a bit too pushy and it's leading to burnout for their kids, which I feel bad about.
I was fortunate that my entree, and I didn't touch a racket till I was 16, and I jumped in boarding school squash. So it was all team squash. So I didn't know any different. That it was like literally 7 years or so before I really competed by myself. And it felt so weird to me. So I had like the inverse experience. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
What about officiating or refereeing?
Oof. Positives? I mean, loser doesn't have to referee. I'll take that as positive.
Which is a true thing that used to happen literally 15 years ago in the sport,
Oh,
where the losers at major professional tournaments would have to referee.
yeah.
So that's a pretty big improvement.
That is a massive improvement. Yeah. Downfall, well, I don't think that they get paid enough, in which case there's no incentive to become a referee and to actually make referees better.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall funding in the sport is not where we would all desire it to be.
Yes.
And, I mean, just even for you, imagine, and you're sort of already being asked to do the same level with less, right? So, like, if that's unfair, then where else is that true that we need to be investing funds to improve the sport? And I totally agree. I think there are a huge guys and girls that do this. And actually, I was interviewing Hope Prokop, which is how amazing is it that we have someone like her now operating at that level, and we need more people like that. So,
Yep.
what about desired future plans for the sport?
Ooh, I would love pros' desired future plans for the sport. Well, to market it, I would love to put on showcase events in cool, iconic locations around the US, like the Octagon in Vegas. I think that would be awesome.
Hmm.
And also to put on a proper professional squash league in the US that has money for pros and is a team environment, and on the team you can get singles and doubles players to kind of bridge that gap in the US.
I feel like you've been reading my secret notes because those were exactly. I also those were two on my list too because I think America we understand team sports more. We understand like, hey, let's root for Boston, let's root for LA.
Yeah,
Like it's really hard to when you roll up to a match be like, okay, there's 10 Egyptians, there's 3 French, like who am I supposed to pick who to root for?
exactly.
Right? Like that's a challenge. So I definitely agree in iconic places we can do that would be great. The other one I would say is also diversity of products. So we do a lot of tournament squash.
Mhm.
I'd like to see the league structure, see more team squash. Entertainment squash is something we really need to get into. And this has happened more, I would say, ad hoc, but formalize more the exhibition tour.
That's I totally agree of putting on showcase events that aren't tournaments and won't
Mhm.
rankings or ratings, none of that, but it's like fun exhibition, invitational, like just you come for the experience.
I would, in my role when I was at US Squash, and really I was helping liaise with the pro tour in the UK and Europe and helping the US promoters. I would dissuade everyone from running tournaments,
Yeah,
especially the first year. Like, don't jump in with so many restrictions. Right, start small, get your feet wet around it, because then with every tournament, there's so many more restrictions that come with it and challenges. So, I think there's a lot of opportunity.
yeah. Well, good to know. I'm gonna pick your brain after this.
Yeah. Well, we're going to switch into the standard quickfire questions. And if these goes nowhere, it's no problem. That's on me. But we'll start off easy with, do you have a favorite documentary?
I did watch The Last Dance. That's a
Mm-hmm.
that was
With what?
unbelievable. I watched that twice. It was so good.
Did you really?
Yeah. Oh, the other one that's amazing is The Weight of Gold, HBO
I don't know.
documentary. It's about Michael Phelps narrates it, and it talks about the just the pressures behind being an Olympic athlete. And I watched that when I got back from my first wave of tournaments in October, and it resonated. It hit close to home.
Was there anything, I mean, right there, Michael Jordan and Michael Phelps, was there anything that you gleaned off of? Obviously, there's so much we could, but was there anything you're like, oh, I need to incorporate that in my mentality or something? Did you take away anything that you're trying to do now?
I think it's having that mentality of always doing a little bit extra. I was great about training, and I thought that I'm doing a good job, but like you could always do a little bit more, and being disciplined in the outside, like the stuff you do off court or outside of the gym, the hydration, the diet, the sleep, the physio, the recovery, the mental preparation. There's so many little components that if you do spend maybe, or you enhance it and you get a little bit better in all those things across the board, then your performance overall is gonna go up drastically.
Yeah, it's interesting for me here because I'm guilty of being a perfectionist, and it's with business, it got beaten out of me. Where is it that you always want to push to do a little bit more because the small changes end up making a big difference.
Mhm.
But then when is it you're getting to the point of diminishing returns? And it's something I struggle with personally. And so it's I think being aware that that is a challenge. And when are you, like literally I've been crying, like editing certain stuff and it got lost. And that was like 5 hours of my life gone. So anyway, yeah, switching what gets you fired up. And this can be either in squash world or outside of it, like in life. And it can either be you're fired up because you're pissed off, you're angry, or you're fired up because you're like excited and it just energizes you. So you can go in any direction you want, but what gets Amanda Sobhy fired up?
One is, this isn't that kind of like deep, but music gets me fired up. I grew up with music. My mom's a school music teacher. I grew up playing the French horn, the piano, singing. And so music was a big part of my life. I even have a tattoo of music on my wrist. So it's just something that I feel like when you can't really express yourself in the form of words, or you need a feeling or emotion, music's always there. And I've always found music to be there for me sometimes when I just don't have people to rely on for that.
Do you naturally gravitate towards like, hey, I need to pick up my French horn and play? Or is that you go towards your playlist?
I go towards playlist. So now I go towards listening to music, and the only music that I do is just singing for fun. I want to be able to join a choir again to be able to sing. I would love that, but just haven't found that here in Philly. And it's always been listening to music.
Do you have your 2020 anthem song?
No, I don't have, because there are so many different, with the moods that I went through in 2020, man, like that is a whole list.
Well, what was the one? Let's go for an uplift. Like, what was the like? Hey, if I listen to this song, it's going to give me an injection of happiness. Like, what would be that song?
There's currently, I've been loving this kind of dance song called "This Is Real" by Jax Jones, but yeah, it's the current one now.
You want to hum us a few bars?
No, absolutely not. No. But I love just kind of those tropical house vibes. So it's the music that is with almost like saxophone, and it's jazz and type stuff, but with like a dance type of EDM beat to it.
Oh, cool.
And it's just like all around those good feel vibes type thing.
How long's the song?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's certain songs like I don't know, that like 5 or 8 minutes long and just kind of like take you through an arc, and I love that kind of stuff. When you describe it, remind me of a couple songs. But next question: what is something that brings you disproportionate happiness? And what I'm going to give a quick caveat is, I think family, friends, pets, or what have you can all bring us happiness. So that's kind of the obvious place you might go. But it can either be an activity or something. So a couple different ways you can go with this, but what is it that would bring you disproportionate happiness?
Well, I know in terms of family, but she's a little special one. My 98-year-old granny Babs.
All right. You're right. You're right. That one comes in, especially if you cross the threshold of 95. I think anything gets in.
Just
98.
98, yeah. And
Wow.
so I haven't seen her since January because she's in a retirement home. And with the pandemic, it's been really tough. Like they're not allowing guests. And if you do, you have to get a COVID test a week before. And so it just hasn't worked out, unfortunately. But she has this amazing aide, and we FaceTime the aide and then FaceTime Babs.
Yeah.
And just having her kind of make it through this year when she thrives off of social interaction and exercise, and like that's
Yeah.
kind of been taken away from her, and she's been hanging on and staying strong. She's just such a positive like ray of sunshine, and I love putting her little workout videos. She's always dressed impeccably, and she's like doing little squats and arm raises with dumbbells, and I love just putting that on my Instagram for everyone.
Oh, that's great. Well, I think that also brings other people disproportionate happiness. So
Yeah.
it works all around. I like it. Next question is, are you familiar with TED Talks?
Yes, a little bit.
Okay. So the scenario here is you're going to give a TED Talk, but it can't be something that you're widely known for. So it can either be something that people might not know about you, or something that you're interested in exploring and then would give a talk about it. So what would be your TED Talk for this? Well, let me quickly pull an audible and say, so you're at Harvard, 4 years, well done.
Thank you.
Was there a class that just kind of like sticks out in your mind that like, this was a great class?
I'm actually laughing because I had this conversation with my sister last week, and
Is that
I
right?
was like, I don't remember any classes I took. I think I remember because we were talking about with our family. My brother was there too. We were talking about like the jokey classes that we took. My mom was like, Omar took one that was the interpretation of dance. Amanda took one on chocolate. And I was like, and I told her, and I was like, I just remember that because I took that senior spring as in like a fun class to take. And so those are kind of the only classes that I remember my last semester. And even then, I think I only remember two of them.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you, honestly. I got the piece of paper though, but couldn't tell you what I learned.
All good. For me, there was a journalism class I took. And I mean, I knew I wasn't a good writer, and this just highlighted it too, but it gave me a deeper appreciation of how to actually have a chance at writing and how to be pithy with words, how to be very economic in your word choices and get to the lead and that kind of stuff. And we were able to like shadow, this was in Ohio. So the closest city to us was Columbus. So we would shadow like some people on the beat report or that kind of stuff. So anyway, that one would jump to mind for me.
I'm glad that you have a class that stood out. My TED Talk could be on how to get through Harvard as a student athlete and not remember anything.
I like it. So the last question we'll end on, and again, I really appreciate all your time here, is there a book, and because this also is a podcast, feel free to use a podcast, but is there a book or a podcast that you would recommend and why?
Ooh. So in terms of, I'm more of a reader. I haven't really gotten too much into podcasts. If I do listen to podcasts, it's the Whoop podcast. That's WHOOP.
Were you guys weren't classmates, were you?
No, but so Will Ahmed, who's the CEO of Whoop, he was a senior when I was a freshman.
Okay.
And we were kind of the test dummies for his initial product and everything. And so it's been cool seeing it evolve over the years, and they're like killing it.
We need to give a special shout out for that because it's not just killing it. Like, this is someone from the squash world who started a company out of nothing and is now, it's up there. I think the valuation's 100 billion.
Yeah. Something in the billions. That's insane.
Yeah. So what a testament to the drive.
Yeah. And the fact that it's also like been detecting COVID with the respiratory rate and helping so many people just stay safe and not risk like going to see their grandparents for the holidays because they've had their respiratory rate, or like kind of informing them, hey, maybe I should go get tested, or maybe I should like isolate for a little bit because of this spike in respiratory rate. And I think that's huge.
I know we're going to look back at this period in time and just be like, the fact that we're not using so many more wearable devices to kind of tell us what's going on with our body is going to be laughable in about 10 years. When I go to a doctor and they take my heart rate and they weigh me once, I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I get that done multiple times daily and all this. And it's like, more data can really help inform us as people, and specifically athletes need it a ton.
Yeah, 100% agree. And so they're doing a great job, and like they're way ahead of the curve. And I'm just happy to be kind of on the little train with them and watching it grow. But I love, back to the podcasting, I love listening to their podcasts. I think it's because they're such a high performing company, and they're all about achieving, like learning the most about your body to be able to perform at your highest self. Their podcast is all about that, between interviewing people in different kind of sectors of life, whether it's being a CEO of a company, a professional athlete, just like a fitness trainer, and just talking about their life and being a high performer. And there's so many similar crossovers that is relatable, just with, failures and learning from the failures and just growing from it. And everybody has the story of like being knocked down multiple times and hitting rock bottom and building from the ground up. And like that's made them more resilient, and how they got success in the end, and their mindset. And it's just phenomenal to listen to, and it's inspiring. So that's kind of the only real like podcast now, in addition to yours.
Was there any particular guest that stood out for you of like, hey, if someone's going to give this a shot?
I loved listening to, there've been a few pro golfers. Rory McIlroy. I'm not butchering his name, right? It was fine. I'm terrible. Yeah. But his was interesting. I'm terrible with the names, but there's a bunch of others. Honestly, I haven't, even just their podcast on the data and how it works and like what it means, like more in depth about quality of sleep and what's going to help you achieve the best kind of recovery. It's just learning these little things to then have for your own knowledge. And I think knowledge is power. So to just accumulate all of this knowledge to be functioning at your highest self and be a high performer is amazing.
Completely agree. And I would echo that. I think performance is performance, and regardless of where you deploy it, that's what we're aiming for. So on that note, I'm going to just thank you again for your time and for everything you do, for wearing the red, white, and blue, and for continuing going on. And I know all the squash fans out there are excited about, you are doubling down, and we can't wait to be cheering for you. And, you're still very young in this journey, and you already having such a big impact. So we can't wait for the next 10, 20, 30 years to come. So thank you for everything you do for the sport.
Thank you, Connor. I really appreciate it. And thank you for having me on the podcast.
Anytime. Well, thank you so much for your time today and for joining us on Squash Radio. We hope you enjoyed this latest episode. But before you leave, we just have one quick last message. As you know, Squash Radio wants to help tell some of the best stories from Squash World. But in order to do that, we want and welcome your help. Do you know a person or a story that involves squash that is interesting, funny, moved you, you care about, reflects your passion for the sport? Well, share it with us, and let's try and get it out there on the air. You can email me at squashradio@gmail.com or reach out to us on social media. Again, thanks for your time, and, well, until next time, be well and have fun.